They left me bleeding on the emergency room floor while they searched my house for the deed. What they found instead was footage of them planning to kill me for my VA benefits. By the time the FBI arrived, I wasn't just alive, I was their insurance policy. But let me rewind to how a decorated Marine became bait in her own son's murder plot. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres, retired, 25 years active duty, 3 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart from the IED that shattered my left hip in Fallujah. That same hip landed me back in surgery at 57, 9 months after I moved in with my son Danny and his wife Melissa in Riverside, California. The house was spacious, the neighborhood quiet, and they insisted I needed family close during recovery. I was stupid enough to believe them. The first surgery went fine. The second one, the revision surgery because of complications, that's when everything changed. I woke up in the ICU with a catheter, drainage tubes, and Danny nowhere to be found. The nurse told me he'd been there all day, but I could smell Melissa's perfume on the chair, that heavy vanilla scent that always made me nauseous. They'd sat in that chair planning something while I was under anesthesia. When I finally got discharged, Danny was 40 minutes late picking me up. Not 15 minutes, not half an hour. 40 goddamn minutes. I sat in that hospital wheelchair, in the lobby, watching orderlies push other patients out to waiting cars, while my own son couldn't be bothered to answer his phone. When he finally strolled in, hair wet from the gym, Melissa's coffee cup in his hand, he had the audacity to check his watch and say, "Traffic was brutal, Mom." But here's what tipped me off. The car ride home was silent, but Melissa kept glancing at her phone and smiling. Not scrolling, not texting, just checking the time and smiling. Like she was waiting for something good to happen. Like she had a secret that was about to pay off. I asked her what was funny. She said, "Oh, nothing, Mom. Just glad you're coming home. Coming home. Not that you're feeling better. Not that the surgery went well. Coming home." Like it was a temporary arrangement, with an expiration date. The house felt different when we pulled up. Subtle things. My favorite reading chair was angled wrong. The throw pillows were fluffed too perfectly. The mail wasn't on the kitchen counter where I always left it. These weren't signs of burglary. They were signs of people moving through my space while I was gone, touching my things, rearranging my life to fit theirs. Danny helped me up the stairs with this overly gentle touch, like I was made of glass. Every 2 steps, he'd ask if I needed to rest. 8 months earlier, after my knee surgery, he'd practically carried me up these same stairs in one go, telling me jokes about drill sergeants and making me laugh despite the pain. Now he was treating me like I might shatter, like he needed me to be fragile. That night, the first night back, I overheard them through the floor vents. My bedroom was directly above theirs, and sound carried through the old heating system like a telephone. They were whispering, but whispers in that house had a way of finding me. "The will is in the safe deposit box," Melissa said. "I checked last week." "And she never updated it after Dad died?" Danny asked. "Never. Everything comes to you, then to us. $1.2 million in assets, another $800,000 in VA benefits, plus the pension continues." A pause. Then Danny's voice, harder than I'd you ever heard it. "The doctor said 6 weeks recovery, maybe 8. Or less if she doesn't follow instructions." I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the hip pain, though the meds were making me drowsy in a way that felt unnatural, but because of a memory. 3 years ago, when Danny first met Melissa, he'd brought her to my retirement party at Camp Pendleton. She'd spent the entire time asking questions about my benefits package, my insurance, my financial security and retirement. I'd thought she was just being practical, maybe even caring. Now I realized she'd been taking inventory. The next morning, I decided to run a test. I asked Danny for my pill organizer, the one I'd been using since the first surgery. He brought me a new one. "Where's my old one?" I asked. "This one's easier to see. color-coded. I liked my old one. It's got Semper Fi stamped on the lid. His jaw tightened. I couldn't find it, Mom. This one's better anyway. That afternoon, while Danny was at work and Melissa was getting her nails done, I searched the house. Not for my pill organizer. I found that in the garage trash can, empty. I was looking for what they might have been searching for while I was in surgery. My safe? Untouched, lock still covered in the same dust. My jewelry box? Undisturbed. But my desk drawers were different. Papers squared off too perfectly. Files that had been slightly askew were now aligned with military precision, the kind of precision I'd taught Danny years ago, but he'd never bothered to use. Inside the file marked important documents, I found something that made my blood run cold. A photocopy of my will, not the original, that was still in the safe deposit box, but a copy I'd made years ago for my attorney. Someone had been studying it. There were tiny pencil marks in the margins, notes in Melissa's handwriting. Primary beneficiary, VA death, benefits, property assets. They weren't waiting for me to die naturally. They were calculating. But here's what they didn't know about their fragile mother-in-law. 25 years in the Corps doesn't just teach you how to fight. It teaches you how to observe, how to plan, how to survive when everyone assumes you're down for the count. And more importantly, it teaches you that when someone's trying to kill you, you don't confront them. You document them. I started with the pills, using a burner phone I'd kept from my deployment days, old habits from intelligence work. I photographed every pill they gave me, researched every medication. The oxycodone was legitimate. The blood thinner was prescribed. But there was something else, something small and blue that didn't match any of my discharge papers. A diuretic, strong enough to cause dangerous dehydration, especially combined with the blood thinner, especially for someone recovering from surgery. I flushed every blue pill down the toilet and started keeping a medical journal. Heart rate, blood pressure, water intake, bathroom frequency, all the mundane details that would later prove someone was medicating me off prescription. 2 weeks after coming home, I staged my first test. I called Danny into my room around midnight, clutching my chest, breathing heavily. "Something's wrong," I gasped. "My heart's racing. I need to go to the ER." He hesitated. Not the hesitation of someone deciding if it's serious enough, the hesitation of someone calculating if it's happening too soon. "Let me get Melissa," he said finally. "She's better with medical stuff." Melissa appeared in a nightgown that cost more than my monthly pension check. She took my pulse, asked about my symptoms, and suggested I just needed more rest. "Hospital emergency rooms are full of germs," she said. "You don't want an infection on top of everything else," I insisted. Danny called an Uber. At the hospital, they ran every test, found nothing wrong except slightly elevated blood pressure, normal for a surgical patient in pain. But here's what they also found. My medical records from 3 days before, when apparently I'd been brought in for dizziness and confusion and released after 2 hours. I hadn't been to the hospital 3 days before. Someone had used my information, my insurance, to establish a medical history of instability. Someone had been laying groundwork, creating a paper trail that would make my eventual death seem like a series of unfortunate complications rather than murder. That night, still in the ER, I made 2 phone calls on the burner phone. The first was to my old platoon sergeant, Marcus Rodriguez, now working private security in Los Angeles. The second was to the VA fraud hotline, but I hung up before they answered. I wasn't ready to burn them yet. I needed more evidence. The evidence would come the next day, when I discovered the life insurance policy Danny had taken out on me 6 weeks before my surgery. $500,000, double indemnity for accidental death. The premium. Payments were auto-drafted from the account where I'd been depositing half my pension each month, the account he'd convinced me to add him to for emergencies. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They weren't just medicating me into an early grave. They were building a financial empire on my corpse, one policy and one forged prescription at a time. But the Marines have a saying, adapt and overcome. By the time they realized I was adapting, I'd already begun to overcome. Over the next 3 weeks, I built a case that would have made my old intel officers proud. Every conversation was recorded on tiny devices Marcus had sourced from his security. Contacts. Every medication was logged and photographed. Every concern about Mother's mental state that Danny shared with neighbors was captured by the security cameras I'd had installed, with full legal notification, of course, while they were at Melissa's cousin's wedding. The turning point came when I overheard them rehearsing. Actually rehearsing what they'd say to the police, to the insurance company, to anyone who might ask questions. She'd been confused since the surgery, Danny practiced, missing medications, forgetting conversations. We tried to get her help, but she was so independent. Don't forget the depression, Melissa coached. Veterans PTSD. She had trouble sleeping, stopped eating regularly. Right, and the drinking. She started drinking more after Dad died. I hadn't touched alcohol in 15 years, haven't touched a cigarette since boot camp. But they were building a story, a believable decline that would explain away any suspicions. That's when I knew they weren't just considering murder. They were already writing my eulogy. But here's what neither of them understood about combat veterans. We're trained for scenarios where the enemy has every advantage, where the mission seems impossible, where the only way out is through. We learn to turn weakness into strength, disadvantage into opportunity. And sometimes the best defense is letting the enemy think they're winning until the moment you prove they've already lost. I was about to show my son and his wife what happens when you mistake a Marine's strategic retreat for surrender. They thought they were planning my funeral. They had no idea I was planning their destruction. The hip pain was real, the recovery was hard, but my mind was sharp as ever, and my resolve was harder than any IED that had ever tried to take me down. They'd made one crucial mistake. They'd given me time to prepare for battle, and unlike them, I'd spent 25 years learning how to win wars. The morning I discovered Marcus Rodriguez was already following Melissa to her twice-weekly spin class sessions, I knew we were moving into active reconnaissance phase. Marcus had served under me in Baghdad, handled counterintelligence during the insurgency, and now ran a private security firm that specialized in corporate espionage. When I called him from my hospital bed that night, I'd spoken in the old code we'd used for off-books operations. He'd understood immediately. Eyes on the objective, Colonel. His text read at 0600, along with a photo of Melissa entering a nondescript office building in downtown Riverside. No spin class. The building directory listed 6 businesses, but the one she visited had no public signage. Marcus would later confirm it was a private investigation firm specializing in pre-death asset verification, essentially helping heirs find and catalog everything their targets owned before death made accessing information more difficult. The next piece of evidence arrived through Danny's own carelessness. He'd been using my home computer to research my service record, specifically looking for any undisclosed benefits or pensions I might have. What he didn't realize was that my old laptop still had security protocols I'd installed years ago. Every search was logged, every document opened was tracked. The history showed a clear pattern: medical discharge procedures, veteran death benefits, contested wills, and most chilling, average time frame from hip surgery to fatal complications. I had been documenting everything in my war journal. Yes, I still keep one, using the same shorthand system I'd developed during deployment. Every pill Melissa dispensed, every concerned phone call Danny made to my doctors, every time they whispered outside my door. The journal was hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War that sat on my bed shelf between my official service citations. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, but they were escalating, and I needed to match their tempo. 3 weeks after my discharge, Melissa suggested I might benefit from professional help, a grief counselor, she said, to deal with losing my husband Robert 2 years earlier. The counselor she recommended was Dr. Patricia Hendricks, who just happened to specialize in end-of-life planning and acceptance therapy. Her office was in the same building Melissa visited every Tuesday. I agreed to go. Took the appointment. Sat in Dr. Hendricks's beige office while she asked about my fears regarding aging and my thoughts about leaving a legacy. Through the thin walls, I could hear Melissa in the adjacent office. She'd timed her asset verification appointment to coincide with my counseling session. Multitasking at its finest, Dr. Hendricks suggested I might want to discuss my living will, my healthcare proxy, my burial preferences. She had pamphlets ready, pre-printed forms, almost like she'd been expecting this exact conversation. Some families find it helpful when the elderly member takes an active role in planning, she said gently. It removes the burden from loved ones. I smiled and took the paperwork. I'm not feeling particularly elderly, doctor. 25 years in. The Marines teaches you to plan for anything. I've had those documents for years. Her pen paused over her notepad. This wasn't the response she'd been coached to expect. That afternoon, while Danny was supposedly working and Melissa was running errands, I had Marcus conduct a full background check on Dr. Hendricks. Not hard when you have ex-military contacts throughout law enforcement. Turns out she'd lost her license in Nevada for testifying in elder abuse cases where families had paid her to declare their relatives mentally incompetent. She'd moved to California, got recertified, and now specialized in transition counseling. The net was tightening, and they didn't even know they were the ones caught in it. The truly damning evidence came when I started asking Danny direct questions about paperwork. Casual questions, the kind a confused older woman might ask. Danny, honey, did I sign something at the hospital after the surgery? My memory's a bit fuzzy from the anesthesia. His eyes darted left, the same tell he'd had since he was 12 and lying about broken windows. Just the discharge papers, Mom. Nothing important. But Marcus had already pulled the hospital records through his security channels. There were 3 additional documents signed in my name. A medical power of attorney naming Danny as primary decision-maker, a DNR order, and a pre-authorization for comfort care measures should my condition deteriorate. The signatures looked like mine, but the handwriting analyst Marcus hired, a woman who'd testified in dozens of fraud cases, found 14 distinct differences from my genuine signature on file. They were building infrastructure, creating legal pathways to end my life without suspicion, to access my assets without hindrance, to control every aspect of my death while keeping their hands clean. But they underestimated one crucial factor. Marines don't just survive impossible odds, we thrive in them. And right now, being outnumbered and outgunned felt like home. I decided to test their real timeline. During dinner, I mentioned casually that I'd been thinking about updating my will. Danny nearly choked on his pot roast. Why would you need to do that, Mom? Everything's fine the way it is. Oh, I don't know. Maybe add something for Marcus. He's been helping me with some computer issues. Melissa's fork clattered onto her plate. Marcus Rodriguez, old Marine buddy. You remember him, Danny? His daughter just graduated college. Might be nice to help with her student loans. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. How much were you thinking? Danny asked, trying to sound casual. Maybe 50,000? Or maybe I should review the whole thing. Make sure it's fair. That night, I heard them arguing through the vents. Not whispering this time, hissing like angry cats. She can't change the will now, Melissa snapped. We're too close. She doesn't. Just give money away. She's never just given money away. Then we move faster. The death certificate just says heart failure, respiratory distress, complications from surgery. Happens all the time with elderly patients. She's 57, Melissa. That's not exactly elderly. Close enough, especially with her medical history. Danny's voice dropped lower. The blue pills aren't working fast enough. Then we increase the dosage, or we have other options. I recorded every word. My phone, tucked inside a tissue box next to the vent, caught it all with crystal clarity. The next morning, I implemented phase 2 of my operation. I called my actual attorney, not the one they thought I used, but my real lawyer, Janet Morrison, who handled classified military contracts and understood operational security. I'd been using her firm since my discharge, but I'd kept that information. Compartmentalized even from Danny. "Janet, I need you to prepare 2 sets of documents," I told her from my burner phone during one of my afternoon naps. "1 set they can find, 1 set they can't." The decoy documents would show Danny as primary beneficiary, but with one crucial change: a clause requiring medical certification of cause of death and a 6-month waiting period for any suspicious circumstances. The real documents were different. So different. While I was building my defense, they accelerated their offense. Melissa started leaving vitamins and supplements in my room, bottles with labels torn off at the corners, contents that never quite matched what was on the label. Danny began scheduling more doctor appointments, always with new physicians, always asking about my mental clarity and decision-making capacity. They also hired a home health aide. Her name was Carmen, and she arrived on a Thursday morning with a bright smile and credentials that, Marcus later discovered, belonged to someone who died in Phoenix 6 months earlier. Carmen had experience in palliative care and end-of-life services. I let her in, gave her the tour, watched her eyes catalog everything: the medications on my dresser, the family photos on the wall, the emergency contacts list on the fridge. She was another asset in their operation, another player in their game. But they'd invited the wrong opponent to this chess match. Over the following week, I documented Carmen's every move. She replaced my blood pressure medication with something that looked identical but made my heart race when I took it. She suggested I might be more comfortable with home oxygen to help with breathing during recovery. She asked subtle questions about my sleep patterns, my appetite, my moods. Most tellingly, she started documenting things that weren't happening. Feeding charts showing I'd eaten when I hadn't. Medication logs showing pills dispensed when she'd actually pocketed them. Behavioral notes describing confusion and agitation during times when I'd been completely coherent but alone with her. The false documentation was key. If I died under suspicious circumstances, they'd have a paper trail showing gradual decline, professional care, family concern. They'd have expert witnesses in Dr. Hendricks and Carmen. They'd have Danny's tearful testimony about a mother who'd never recovered from surgery, who'd been slipping away despite their best efforts. It was actually a brilliant plan. Slow poisoning masked as medical complications, psychological warfare, disguised as concerned care. Identity fraud hidden behind legitimate documents. They'd thought of everything, except one thing. I'd survived insurgents, IEDs, and 25 years of government bureaucracy. A son playing amateur assassin and his gold-digging wife weren't even in the same league. By the time I finished my reconnaissance, I had enough evidence to end them. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed them to confess. I needed them to act. I needed them to make a mistake big enough that even a sympathetic jury couldn't ignore it. War isn't just about having the better weapons. It's about making the enemy use theirs at the wrong time, in the wrong place, against the wrong target. And I was about to show them what happens when you mistake a tactical retreat for defeat. The catalyst came on a rainy Tuesday morning when I overheard Carmen on her cell phone in my bathroom, whispering to someone she called the specialist. The words sodium chloride injection and undetectable filtered through the thin door like shards of glass. I had exactly 45 minutes before she'd return with my morning medications. Using the burner phone Marcus had modified to connect, via satellite instead of local towers, I initiated what my old intelligence unit called Operation Lazarus, a protocol we'd used in the field when an operative needed to disappear quickly and reappear strategically. First call went to Marcus. Execute Phase 3, now. Moving on your order, Colonel. Second call was to Janet Morrison. File both sets of documents today. Make sure the decoy registration gets timestamped at exactly 14:30 hours. That's cutting it close, Rebecca. It needs to look like panic timing. The third call was the riskiest. Danny's number. Mom? His voice was strained. Everything okay? Danny, I need you home, now. Something's wrong with these medications and I'm scared. What kind of wrong? Should I call the doctor? No doctors. Just you, please. I let my voice shake, not hard when you're terrified for legitimate reasons, and added the crucial hook. I think I made a mistake with my will. I need to fix it today. 23 minutes. That's how long it took for Danny's Honda Civic to screech into the driveway. I was ready. My war journal, the real one, was sealed in waterproof plastic and hidden inside the garage insulation behind the water heater, a location I'd scouted weeks earlier. The decoy journal, filled with confused entries and evidence of mental decline, sat prominently on my nightstand. My emergency bag was packed and positioned in the coat closet. Most importantly, Marcus and his team were staged at 3 key locations around the neighborhood. Danny burst through the door, Melissa right behind him, both of them breathless. Carmen emerged from the kitchen, her presence feeling less like coincidence and more like coordination. What's wrong, Mom? What did you mean about the will? I sat on my bed, hands trembling slightly, partly staged, partly genuine adrenaline. I've been thinking. Maybe I made things too complicated. Maybe if something happens to me, you won't get everything as quickly as you should. Melissa's eyes lit up. Danny looked uncertain. I want to make it simpler, I continued. Change the beneficiaries to just you. No waiting periods, no conditions. Today. Carmen stepped closer, her hand resting on a medical supply bag. Mrs. Torres, I really think you should rest before making any big decisions. No, I said firmly, standing up too quickly. The hip pain was real, causing me to stumble slightly. I want my lawyer here. Now. Mom, it's Tuesday afternoon. We can call tomorrow. I said now. My voice echoed with command authority I hadn't used since active duty. Call Janet Morrison. Tell her I need to sign papers immediately. The room went silent. They exchanged looks, a three-way communication that excluded me entirely. Danny pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, my chest tightened. Real pain this time, radiating down my left arm. I can't breathe. I gasped, clutching my chest. Carmen moved fast. Too fast. She reached into her medical bag and pulled out a syringe, pre-filled. Emergency medication, she announced, approaching, with practiced efficiency. What is it? Danny demanded. Epinephrine, for heart distress. That's when I knew. The syringe wasn't filled with epinephrine. Carmen wasn't reaching for my arm. She was aiming for my IV port, the one I still had from surgery that they'd convinced me to keep for emergencies. In one fluid motion, I knocked the syringe from her hand and triggered the panic button. Marcus had sewn into my sleeve 3 days earlier. You're killing me! I screamed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Danny, she's trying to kill me! The syringe rolled across the hardwood floor. Melissa lunged for it, but I grabbed her wrist, using a pressure point technique that made her yelp and drop to her knees. Mom, what the hell? Danny moved toward me, confusion and fear warring on his face. Don't touch me! I scrambled backward, hitting the nightstand. The decoy journal fell open. They've been poisoning me! Check the syringe! Check it! Carmen bolted. For the door. She made it exactly 7 steps before Marcus materialized from the hallway, his 6.4 frame blocking her exit like a wall. Nobody leaves, he said calmly, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd run security for senators and CEOs. Danny froze. Melissa was still on the floor, cradling her wrist. Carmen looked around desperately, but 2 more of Marcus's team had appeared, one at the back door, one at the front window. "Mr. Torres," Marcus continued, addressing Danny, "I suggest you put your phone on the kitchen counter and sit down. We're going to wait for the police." "Police? What police? Mom, what's happening?" I was breathing hard, the adrenaline making everything crystal clear. "What's happening is you've been planning to murder me. What's happening is I have everything documented. What's happening is the game's over." Marcus had Carmen handcuffed within seconds. She didn't fight, just stared at the floor. Like a child caught stealing. "Danny, sit," I ordered. When he didn't move, Marcus stepped toward him. Danny sat. "I'm calling the police," Danny said weakly. "No need." Marcus held up his phone. "They're already en route, have been since you pulled into the driveway." The siren. Sounds started 3 minutes later. The first responders weren't EMTs, they were detectives. Detective Sarah Chen of the Riverside Police Department specifically, someone Marcus had contacted the day before when our evidence reached critical mass. "Mrs. Torres, are you injured?" she asked as she entered, her eyes scanning the room and noting the positions of everyone present. "Physically? No more than usual. Psychologically? That's a longer conversation." Detective Chen's partner was already securing the syringe in an evidence bag. "Ma'am, someone want to tell me why we received a call about attempted murder?" I reached into my nightstand and pulled out a thick folder. "Detective, I have documentation spanning 3 weeks showing a systematic attempt to murder me for inheritance money. Forged documents, unauthorized medications, falsified medical records, and a hired caregiver who just tried to inject me with unknown substances." Melissa finally found her voice. "This is insane. She's confused. Maybe having a breakdown." "Shut up, Melissa." The words cut through the room like a blade, and they came from Danny. He was staring at the syringe in the evidence bag, his face gray. "Mom's not confused. She's never confused about anything. Oh God, what have we done?" "We?" Melissa hissed. "This was your idea. You're the one who—" "Both of you stop talking," Detective Chen interrupted. "And Ms. Torres, I'm going to need you to come with us to the station where we can properly document everything." I stood, my hips screaming in protest, but I stood tall. 25 years of military bearing kicked in. "Detective, I have one request before we go anywhere." "What's that, ma'am?" "I want to see my real will." "My lawyer should be here any minute with the documents I actually signed. Not the forgeries, the real ones." On cue, Janet Morrison walked through the front door, briefcase in hand. "Mrs. Torres, everything's ready as you requested." Danny's face went white. "Mom, I don't understand." I walked to the kitchen table and spread out my true will. "Understand this, son. 3 weeks ago, I changed everything. Every asset, every policy, every inheritance. You're still my beneficiary, but now you have to earn it." "What does that mean?" "It means you confess to everything. It means you throw yourself on the mercy of the court and take full responsibility. It means you serve whatever sentence they give you, and when you get out, if you've learned what family really means, maybe then you might see a dime." Melissa started to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration. Carmen remained silent, professional even in handcuffs. "And if I don't?" Danny asked quietly. "Then everything goes to the Veterans Administration to fund elder abuse prevention programs. Every penny, every property, every benefit. You'll have nothing, and the world will know exactly what you tried to do to a retired Marine officer who trusted you with her life." Detective Chen was writing notes rapidly. "Mrs. Torres, I need to ask, when did you become aware of this plot?" "The night they left me in the hospital lobby," I replied. "Everything since then has been reconnaissance and documentation, just like we did in Baghdad. Identify the threat, gather intelligence, wait for them to commit to the action, then neutralize it." Marcus handed Detective Chen a thick envelope. "Everything's documented, Detective. Surveillance footage, audio recordings, medical evidence, forged signatures. It's all there. How long have you been gathering this evidence? 3 weeks. But we had to wait for them to make their move. We needed proof of intent, not just suspicion. Danny looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time since coming home from the hospital, I saw my son instead of a stranger. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know how it got this far. You were thinking $1 million was worth more than your mother's life, I said quietly. That's exactly how far it got. As the police led them out, Danny in handcuffs, Melissa still protesting, Carmen resigned to her fate, Marcus approached me. You okay, Colonel? No, I admitted. But I will be. What's next? I looked around my house, really my house now, with the deed secured and the title clear. Next, I heal. From the surgery, from the betrayal, from everything. And then we use this experience to help other veterans who might be facing the same threats from their own families. The evidence will convict them. The evidence in their confession. Danny's breaking already. He'll flip on Melissa, Carmen. We'll flip on whoever hired her, and the whole operation will unravel. Marcus nodded. And your will? Already filed. Already ironclad. Danny's portion goes into a trust he can't touch until he's completed mandatory counseling, community service, and proved he understands the value of family loyalty. Think he'll come back from this? I watched through the window as the police car containing my son drove away. I served with men who came back from worse betrayals. It's possible, but that's his war to fight now. That night, alone in my house. For the first time in months, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and opened a new war journal. This one wouldn't be about documenting threats. It would be about documenting recovery, because the hardest battle wasn't surviving the attempt on my life. It was learning to trust again, to hope again, to believe that family could mean safety instead of danger. But that's a war for another day. Today, I'd won the decisive battle. Semper Fi, indeed. 6 weeks after the arrests, I sat in a federal courtroom in downtown Los Angeles, watching 3 lives unravel like cheap yarn. The prosecution had worked fast, apparently attempted murder. Of a decorated veteran gets priority treatment in the justice system. Danny was already cooperating, his lawyer working a plea deal that would see him in minimum security for 18 to 36 months. Carmen faced up to 10 years for elder abuse and fraud, her fake credentials unraveling into a whole network of similar scams across 3 states. But it was Melissa I watched most carefully. She sat ramrod straight in her designer suit, still, playing the grieving daughter-in-law, still insisting this was all a massive misunderstanding. Her attorney was going for temporary insanity caused by financial stress. The prosecution had other ideas. Your Honor, Assistant District Attorney Rodriguez began. No relation to my Marcus, though that coincidence had given us a few laughs during depositions. We have evidence that Mrs. Torres began researching inheritance laws and veteran death. Benefits within 6 weeks of becoming engaged to Daniel Torres. This was a calculated, long-term strategy. He clicked his presentation remote. Bank records filled the screen, showing Melissa's Google searches spanning 18 months. How to. Contest military death benefits. Average recovery time hip surgery elderly. Natural causes versus suspicious death life insurance. DNR order requirements California. My stomach twisted, not from the evidence, but from the timestamps. Some of these searches predated their marriage. She'd started planning before they'd even set a wedding date. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, phone records show extensive communication between Mrs. Torres and Carmen Delgado, the unlicensed caregiver, beginning 2 months before Mrs. Torres's surgery, before the surgery was even scheduled. The jury leaned forward. This was news to most of them. The alleged victim, Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres, has provided this court with extensive documentation of systematic medical abuse, including—" He paused for effect. "Recorded conversations in which the defendants discussed speeding up the process and making it look natural." As my own voice played through the courtroom speakers, weak, supposedly confused, asking about medications, while Danny and Melissa discussed dosages in the background, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger anymore, something colder. Resolve, maybe, or acceptance of what my son had become. During the lunch recess, Danny's lawyer approached me in the hallway. Young guy, expensive suit, trying to look sympathetic while calculating billable hours. "Mrs. Torres, my client would like to speak with you privately." "Is he offering anything I haven't already heard?" "He wants to explain, to apologize properly. He says there are things you don't understand about the pressure he was under." I almost laughed. Pressure? Son, I've been under enemy fire. I've had shrapnel in my chest and still completed my mission. Don't talk to me about pressure. "Mrs. Torres, he's your son. And I'm the woman he tried to murder for money." Set up the meeting. They put us in a small conference room, Danny, his lawyer, and me. No Marcus this time. I'd insisted on coming alone. Danny looked like he'd aged a decade. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the water bottle. "Mom, Stop. Let me talk first." I pulled out a photograph from my purse. It was Danny in his high school graduation gown, me in my dress blues, both of us smiling. "Do you remember this day?" He nodded, tears already forming. "You said something to me that night. You said, 'Mom, I'm proud to be your son. I hope I grow up to be half as strong as you are.' Do you remember?" "Yes." I kept that photo on my desk through 3 deployments. When things got bad, when I thought I might not make it home, I'd look at it and remember I had something worth fighting for. I set the photo on the table between us. When did that change, Danny? When did I become something worth killing for? He broke then. Really broke. Not the calculated tears of a man trying to manipulate his victim, but the raw sobs of someone finally understanding what they'd done. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he choked out. Melissa just kept pushing. The house payments, her student loans, the lifestyle she was used to. She said her father left her mother nothing when he died, and she wasn't going to let that happen. To us. "So you decided to speed things along?" She said it would be like putting you out of your misery, that the surgery had changed you, that you weren't the same person anymore. I felt my own hands clench into fists. I had a hip replacement, Danny. Not a lobotomy. I know that now. I knew it then. But I let myself believe what was easier to believe. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the confession strategy they'd rehearsed. "Tell me about the pills," I said quietly. Danny swallowed hard. "Carmen got them through someone she knew. Said they'd make you sleepy, confused. Melissa said if we could document that you were becoming incompetent, we could..." "Could what? Get me declared mentally unfit? Have me institutionalized? Just until..." He stopped himself. "Until I died?" "Say it, Danny. Until your inconvenient mother died and left you everything." "Mom, I love you." "No," I said firmly. "You loved what I represented. Security, inheritance, a comfortable future you didn't have to work for. You loved the idea of me, but not enough to keep me alive." The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. After several minutes, I spoke again. "I'm not here to grant you absolution. I'm here to tell you what happens next." Danny wiped his eyes. "I know. Prison. I'll do my time." "Prison is the least of it. Every night for the rest of your life, you'll lie awake remembering that you poisoned your mother. You'll wake up in cold sweats thinking about how close you came to succeeding. You'll carry that weight until the day you die. I know. But here's what you don't know. I pulled out a sealed envelope from my purse. "This is your inheritance now. Open it." With trembling hands, he broke the seal. Inside was a single key. "What is this?" "The key to a safety deposit box." Inside that box is a video I recorded the night I got home from the hospital. In it, I explain everything you'll need to know about running the elder abuse prevention program I'm establishing. When you get out of prison, when you've served your time and completed your rehabilitation, this is what you'll be doing with the rest of your life. Danny stared at the key. "I don't understand." "You will. The program will be run entirely by people who've either survived attempted elder abuse or committed it. You'll spend the rest of your days helping protect other parents from children like you. It's not punishment, Danny. It's redemption, if you're capable of it. And if I refuse, then you get nothing. No money, no trust fund, no inheritance of any kind. You'll leave prison with the clothes on your back and whatever you can make of your life from scratch." His lawyer started to speak, but I held up my hand. "There's more. In that safety deposit box is also a letter I wrote the night this all started. It's my final words to you. Not angry ones, not bitter ones, but the words of a mother who still loves her son despite the unforgivable things." "He's done." Danny was crying again, softer this time. "Can I read it now?" "No. You'll read it when you're ready to understand it. When you've spent enough sleepless nights thinking about what you almost did to the woman who raised you alone after your father died. When you can look at yourself in the mirror and see what I still see, a man capable of being better than his worst moments." I stood to leave. My hip protested, but I moved smoothly, confidently. "One more thing, Danny." "Yes? I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, and not because it absolves you of anything. I forgive you because I refuse to let your betrayal turn me into someone I'm not. You tried to kill me for money. I'm choosing to save you for love. That's the difference between us." As I walked out of that conference room, I heard Danny say something to his lawyer, voice barely above a whisper. "She's giving me a chance to earn her respect back." "Is that what you want?" the lawyer asked. "It's the only thing I ever really wanted." 3 hours later, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. Melissa stared straight ahead as they read the charges: conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, insurance fraud, forgery. Carmen took her sentence with the same professional detachment she'd shown throughout the ordeal, but it was Danny who surprised me. When they asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he stood and turned to face me in the gallery. "Your Honor, I have nothing to say that would justify my actions. I betrayed the person I should have protected most. I was consumed by greed and let someone else's weakness become my own. I will accept whatever sentence you impose, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to become someone my mother could be proud of again." The judge gave him 18 months. Melissa got 8 years. Carmen got 6. As the marshals led Danny away, he caught my eye one last time. He mouthed 2 words: "Thank you." I nodded once, then left the courthouse. Marcus was waiting with the car. "How do you feel?" he asked as we drove back to Riverside. "Tired," I admitted, "but not defeated. There's a difference." That night I sat on my back deck with a glass of wine, my first alcohol in almost 2 months. The sunset painted the sky in military colors: gold, red, deep purple like a warrior's ribbon. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Torres, this is Lena Reyes. I was one of Carmen's previous victims. I saw the news about your case. Thank you for stopping her. Because of you, I'm finally going to press charges too." Over the next week, 17 more veterans reached out. 17 stories of family members who'd tried to manipulate, control, or eliminate them for financial gain. By the end of the month, I'd started the first support group. We met in my living room, the same room where Danny and Melissa had planned. My murder. 7 veterans, ages ranging from 53 to 84, all of us survivors of a different kind of war, "The hardest part," said Thomas, a Vietnam vet whose daughter had forged his power of attorney, "is learning to trust again. Not just family, but the whole concept of family. I thought about the key in my purse, the one Danny would claim someday if he earned it. Maybe that's what we're here to rebuild. Not the old trust, that's gone. But something new. Something stronger because it's built on truth instead of assumption." Sarah, an Iraq veteran, nodded. "In combat, we learn to trust but verify. Maybe we need to apply that to our civilians too." As the evening wore on and stories were shared, I realized something profound. They hadn't just tried to kill me for money. They'd tried to erase the very essence of who I am. A veteran, a survivor, someone who dedicated their life to serving something bigger than themselves. But veterans don't erase easily. We adapt, we overcome, and we rebuild what's been destroyed into something stronger than before. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Lompoc Federal Correctional Institution. Danny's handwriting, neater than I remembered. "Mom, I think I'm ready to read your letter now. Yesterday marks the halfway point of my sentence, and I wake up every day thinking about what I tried to take from you. Not just your life, but your dignity, your trust, your faith in family. I've been working as a tutor for other inmates, helping them get their GEDs. Teaching reminds me of watching you help me with homework when I was young. You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it yet. That's too easy. What I want is to earn the right to be your son again, even if it takes the rest of my life. The key to the safety deposit box is in my cell, pinned to the wall next to this letter. When I get out, it'll be the first place I go. Semper Fi, Mom. I finally understand what those words meant to you." Danny, I read the letter 3 times, then filed it with the others. Not in anger, not in sorrow, but as documentation of a different kind of recovery. Not from physical wounds, but from the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any enemy bullet. That night, I dreamed of Danny as a child again, asking me to check under his bed for monsters. This time, I told him the monsters were gone. We'd faced them together and won. 8 months after the trial, my new life had settled into an unexpected rhythm. The support group had grown from 7 to 43 veterans, meeting twice weekly in the community center that had offered us free space. After hearing our story, the press had dubbed us the Overwatch Veterans, a name that stuck because it captured exactly what we were doing, watching out for each other against threats from the most unexpected quarters. What I hadn't expected was becoming the face of elder financial abuse awareness in the veteran community. The VA had invited me to consult on new protocols for identifying family-based manipulation. Every major veterans organization wanted me to speak at their conferences. Most surprising of all, I'd started teaching a course at the local community college, Financial Self-Defense for Military Retirees. But success carries its own weight. The morning I received Danny's letter, I also got a package from the Department of Justice. They'd been tracking similar cases across multiple states and wanted to know if I'd consider testifying as an expert witness in a related federal case. The case file was thick, but one detail jumped out immediately. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the transition counselor, who had tried to get me to sign living will documents, was being investigated for a systematic operation spanning 12 states. The FBI had documented 47 cases where she'd helped families accelerate inheritance timelines through a combination of medication manipulation, forged documents, and manufactured medical crises. Marcus found me on the back porch that evening, the file spread across my lap, a cold cup of coffee forgotten beside me. "Bad news?" he asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Worse, systematic evil. This wasn't just about me and Danny. It was a network." I handed him the summary page. Hendricks was the architect. She recruited caregivers like Carmen, targeted families with significant military benefits, and had a pipeline of dirty lawyers and doctors to validate whatever fiction they needed. Marcus whistled low. How many did they kill? Suspected? 12, maybe 15. But only 3 families came forward with enough evidence. The others, they're listed as natural causes or complications from surgery. And they want you to testify? They want me to help unravel the whole thing. Project names, cover identities, financial flows. Turns out my case was their template. If it worked on a retired Marine with combat experience, it would work on anyone. I stood up, my hip twinging in the familiar way that reminded me why I'd needed surgery in the first place. The physical therapy was done, but the psychological recovery was ongoing. Some mornings I still woke up checking my medication bottles, counting pills, verifying that nothing had been tampered with overnight. There's something else, I said, pulling out the second document. They've arrested a 7th person in connection with my case. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Who? Dr. Marcus Chen, the anesthesiologist who handled my initial surgery. Turns out he was feeding information to Hendricks about which patients had substantial assets and questionable family dynamics. Danny and Melissa weren't random. They were specifically targeted because someone flagged me as a high-value, potentially vulnerable mark. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Chen had access to medical records, insurance information, emergency contacts, everything needed to identify profitable targets. He'd pass the information to Hendricks, who would then deploy her network of fake caregivers and unethical counselors. The families didn't just happen upon this scheme, they were recruited into it. How many other veterans? Marcus asked, already pulling out his phone. Unknown, but the FBI started cross-referencing suspicious deaths with Chen's patient list. They're expecting the number to be significant. That night, I called Danny's facility. Visiting hours had ended, but the warden had given me special permission for emergency contact. When Danny came to the phone, his voice was thick with sleep. Mom? Is everything okay? Define okay, I said. I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. The night you and Melissa decided to hire Carmen, how did you find her? Silence. Then, Melissa found her, said she came recommended by that therapy doctor you were seeing. My blood ran cold. Dr. Hendricks recommended Carmen specifically. Yeah. Said she'd worked with military families before, understood veteran issues. Why? Mom? What's wrong? I closed my eyes, the full picture crystallizing. Danny, you weren't just greedy. You were a victim too. They targeted us. They picked our family specifically because they knew how to manipulate the situation. I don't understand. The anesthesiologist who worked on my surgery? He's been arrested. He was part of a network that identified vulnerable veterans with valuable estates and dysfunctional family situations. They recruited your wife into a murder ring, Danny. The phone line crackled with silence. When Danny finally spoke, his voice was hollow. Are you saying Melissa didn't come up with this on her own? I'm saying you were both played. She found the scheme, yes, but it was designed to be found. They made it look like her idea when really, they'd set the whole thing in motion. Jesus Christ. This doesn't absolve either of you, I said firmly. You still chose to go along with it. You still tried to poison your mother. But the scale of this thing, it's bigger than just our family. After we hung up, I spent 3 hours on the phone with the FBI task force. They needed to understand the psychological manipulation tactics, the way the scheme exploited family dynamics and military culture. As someone who'd survived the inside of this operation, I could describe nuances they'd missed. They didn't just want to kill us, I explained to Special Agent Williams, the lead investigator. They wanted to destroy families, turn children against parents, break the bonds that vets depend on after service. It's psychological warfare on a domestic scale. Mrs. Torres, Williams said, we'd like you to consider something. We're building cases against everyone involved, but we need insider testimony. Would you be willing to go undercover? The request caught me off guard. What do you mean? We suspect there are other cells operating. If you reached out to Hendrix's associates, claimed you wanted revenge against the families who survived their schemes, we might be able to identify other potential victims before they become corpses. The irony wasn't lost on me. 8 months ago, I'd been documenting evidence to save my own life. Now they wanted me to pretend to be a victim-turned-perpetrator, to save others. What would that involve? Initial contact, building trust, wearing a wire to meetings. High risk, but you've already proven you can handle this kind of operational stress. I thought about the 43 veterans in my support group, about the families we'd heard from who weren't as lucky, who'd lost their parents, their grandparents, their inheritance, and their faith in family all at once. Give me 48 hours, I told Williams. I need to consult with someone. That someone was Marcus, who laughed when I told him. Not with amusement, with the kind of dark humor that sustained us through Baghdad. Out of the frying pan, right. Colonel? It's not just about justice anymore, I said. It's about prevention. How many families are going through this right now? How many sons like Danny are being manipulated into betraying their parents? You know this could undo everything you've built. If it goes wrong, if they figure out who you really are, then I die anyway. At least this time, it'll be because I chose the mission, not because someone else decided my life wasn't worth living. 2 days later, I met with the FBI team and accepted their proposal. The operation was straightforward in concept, terrifying in execution. I would pose as a vengeful daughter whose father had survived an attempted inheritance scam. I wanted to hire professionals to finish the job and frame his other children for the murder. They set me up with a clean burner phone, a fake background, and enough operational detail to sound credible. My first contact would be through an encrypted forum where Hendrix's network recruited new clients. Sitting at my computer that night, about to type the message that would launch me back into danger, I thought about Danny's latest letter. He'd written about the education he was getting in prison, not just the GED tutoring, but the other inmates who'd shared similar stories of family members manipulated by outside forces. Mom, I'm starting to understand that evil comes in more shapes than I ever imagined. Not just the evil of greed, but the evil of systems designed to turn families against each other. I don't know how you stood up to it, but I'm trying to learn. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The message was simple. Seeking assistance with unfinished family business. Previous attempt unsuccessful. Need professionals who understand veteran estate issues. Payment negotiable. I hit send. 12 hours later, I received a response from an anonymous account. Details required. Verification necessary. Location for initial meeting. Starbucks on Magnolia, next Tuesday 3 p.m. Wear red. Order a venti pike roast. Use the name Sarah. The hook was set. That evening, I gathered my support group for what I told them would be a special session. I couldn't reveal the undercover operation, but I could prepare them for my temporary absence. I need to go handle some personal business, I announced. Related to the ongoing investigation, Marcus will facilitate the meetings. While I'm gone, Thomas, the Vietnam vet who'd become our unofficial second-in-command, nodded slowly. This personal business? Is it dangerous? Everything worth doing carries risk, I replied, echoing words I'd said to my platoon a lifetime ago. After the meeting, Sarah, the Iraq veteran, not my cover identity, pulled me aside. Colonel Torres, I've seen that look before. You're going back to war. Sometimes war comes to you, I said. Sometimes you have to meet it halfway. Bring that motherfucker back with his head down, she said, using the old military blessing. Always. Do. That night, I updated my will, the real one, and placed it in the safety deposit box with Danny's key. If something went wrong, he'd find not just his inheritance, but a detailed account of everything I was doing and why. No matter how this operation ended, someone needed to know that I'd walked back into the darkness of my own volition, not as a victim, but as a warrior choosing her final battlefield. I checked my medication one last time, out of habit more than necessity. The pills were exactly where I'd left them, unmarked, unaltered. Mine to take or not take, on my terms. Tomorrow, I'd become Sarah. But tonight, I was still Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres, combat veteran, survivor, and by God still someone's worst nightmare when they least expected it. The war wasn't over. It had just changed theaters. The Starbucks on Magnolia buzzed with the usual Tuesday afternoon crowd, laptop warriors, suburban moms, and 2 FBI agents pretending to be study group partners 3 tables away. I sat in the corner booth, red, cardigan visible from the door, venti pike roast cooling in front of me. The wire taped to my ribs felt like sandpaper, but I'd worn worse during night patrols in Ramadi. At 3:17, she walked in, mid-40s, designer jeans, perfectly highlighted hair, the kind of woman who'd never missed a yoga class. She scanned the room with practiced casualness before approaching my table. "Sarah?" Her voice was soft, almost maternal. "That's me." I gestured to the empty chair. "Thank you for coming." She slid in smoothly, no coffee order, no small talk. "My name is Rachel. I understand you have unfinished business with your father. The irony of sharing a name with Danny's sister wasn't lost on me. My father survived something he shouldn't have. The family attorney says he's changing his will tomorrow. $6 million, veteran benefits, real estate, investments, all going to charity instead of his children. Because someone tried to expedite his timeline?" I leaned forward, letting genuine anger color my voice. "My brother's hired some nurse who was supposed to help things along. She got caught. Now Dad's punishing all of us for their stupidity." Rachel's eyes sharpened. "Professional help is necessary when family members act without proper guidance. Can you provide that guidance?" "Potentially. But first, I need to understand the scope of what you're asking." I pulled out a manila folder, sliding it across the table. Inside were fabricated documents, medical records, financial statements, a copy of the new will that the FBI had created. "He's healthy now, unfortunately. Lives alone, limited security. The window closes tomorrow morning." Rachel studied the papers with the efficiency of someone who'd reviewed hundreds of similar cases. "Clean target, but the timeline is aggressive. I'm prepared to pay extra for the urgency." "How much extra?" $200,000, cash. Half up, front. She didn't flinch at the number. "There's a more elegant solution than what your brothers attempted." "I'm listening." "Your father has hip issues, correct? Previous surgery?" She tapped the medical records. "We have specialists who understand how to create cascading medical emergencies. It looks like natural complications, but it's completely controlled." I fought to keep my expression neutral. This was the core methodology, taking existing medical conditions and weaponizing them. The same approach used in other cases? Each situation is unique, but we've found that veterans often have multiple medical vulnerabilities that can be amplified. "How many cases like mine have you handled?" Rachel smiled, and for the first time, I saw predator beneath the soccer mom exterior. "Let's just say we maintain excellent client satisfaction rates." Over the next 30 minutes, she outlined the operation with clinical precision. A specialist would visit my father posing as a home health aide. Using his medical history as cover, they'd administer a specific cocktail of medications that would trigger a cardiac event within 72 hours. The local emergency room, already strained by staffing shortages, would classify it as natural causes, especially with a history of heart issues exacerbated by recent surgery. What about the other children? Won't they suspect? By the time they realize what happened, the estate will be in probate. No one investigates paperwork after the fact, especially when everything appears above board. I picked up my coffee, buying time to steady my voice. You've done this before. Our network has extensive experience with veteran estates. Military. Pensions and benefits require specialized knowledge to manage effectively. And if something goes wrong? It won't. We've had one complication in the past year, but that was due to client inexperience. She paused meaningfully. Someone tried to handle it themselves instead of following our protocols. I knew exactly which case she meant. Mine. I need proof this isn't an elaborate setup, I said, pushing slightly. FBI's been sniffing around. Elder abuse cases. Rachel's laugh was genuine, almost amused. Sarah, we've been operating for 8 years. We have doctors, lawyers, and law enforcement contacts who ensure our clients' privacy. The FBI focuses on amateur hour, family members who make mistakes. We don't make mistakes. She pulled out her phone, showing me a secured app. Encrypted communication only. Once you commit, you'll never speak to me again. Everything goes through the system. Who runs the system? That's not your concern. You want results? We provide them. Clean, professional, untrackable. I nodded slowly. I need to discuss final details with my financial advisor before transferring the money. Of course, but remember, tomorrow morning deadline. After the will is filed, the window closes. We stood to leave. Rachel extended her hand, her grip firm and cool. One question, Sarah. Why us instead of handling it yourself? My brothers. Tried the amateur route. I'm not ending up in federal prison. Smart woman. Sometimes family requires professional intervention. As she left, I caught the eye of the FBI agents. They'd recorded everything, but we needed to follow her, identify the network, stop the operations already in motion. I sat back down, ostensibly checking my phone while my hands shook from adrenaline. The wire felt heavier now, evidence of a conversation that could save lives, but had just put a massive target on my back. 30 minutes later, I met Agent Williams in the parking garage of a nearby mall. Marcus was with him, looking grim. Did they follow me? I asked as I slid into Williams's sedan. 2 vehicles. We've got them under surveillance. Williams handed me a bottle of water. You did well, Mrs. Torres. That was excellent intel. It's not intel, I said quietly. It's people's lives. How many operations do you think they have running right now? Based on what we just heard? Could be dozens. The timeline references suggest they do this weekly. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Transfer instructions attached. Return to Magnolia location tomorrow 2 p.m. for confirmation. Come alone. They moved fast, Marcus observed. Because they think I'm desperate, and desperate people pay quickly. I looked at Williams. What's the plan? We track the money, identify the financial infrastructure. Meanwhile, we put surveillance on every known associate from the Hendricks case. Someone has to be coordinating operations. What about my father? The fake one? We'll stage a medical emergency tonight. Get him admitted to a secure facility under guard. By tomorrow, Sarah's father will be in critical condition, buying us time to unravel this. As we drove back to my house, I thought about Rachel's cold efficiency, the way she'd discussed murder like planning a vacation itinerary. This wasn't desperation or greed. This was business. Williams, I said as we turned onto my street. They mentioned one complication in the past year. That was my case, wasn't it? Likely, based on timing and methodology. So they've been studying what went wrong, learning from mistakes. Appears so. That evening, I sat with my support group one final time before Phase 2 of the operation. I couldn't tell them what was happening, but their faces showed they understood something had shifted. Thomas broke the silence. Colonel, whatever you're walking into, remember, you don't fight alone anymore. Nobody fights alone when the cause is right. I replied. Sarah, the Iraq veteran, handed me a small metal object. From my sister's unit, Afghanistan, 2011. For luck. It was a military challenge coin, worn smooth at the edges. A sniper's coin, for precision, patience, and that single perfect shot when it matters most. Keep your head down and bring it back. With honor, she said. That night, I reviewed everything the FBI had provided. Floor plans, contact protocols, emergency extraction points. The operation would escalate tomorrow, but tonight, I allowed myself one moment of doubt. Was I doing this? For justice? For prevention? Or was some part of me seeking the adrenaline rush of combat, the clarity that came only when life balanced on a knife's edge? The answer didn't matter. Tomorrow I'd be Sarah again, grieving daughter, desperate heir, willing client. But underneath that mask, I'd remain what I'd always been. A Marine who'd learned that sometimes the only way to save people was to walk willingly into the darkness, carrying enough light to burn it down. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Danny. Mom, something happened tonight. 3 inmates assaulted. All of them were part of inheritance scams. Word is spreading about families being targeted. Be careful. I love you. I typed back. Always am, son. Always am. Outside. A car engine started in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus beginning his surveillance shift, watching over me while I slept. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but tonight I was surrounded by protectors, both professional and personal. Some wars required soldiers. Others required warriors willing to sacrifice everything for the mission. I'd spent my life being both. Now it was time to be something more. The weapon that turns the enemy's own tactic against them. The ghost in their machine. The survivor who refuses to stay down. Rachel and her network had made one critical error. They'd survived by targeting the weak, the isolated, the vulnerable. They'd never faced someone who'd built strength from betrayal, who'd turned their worst mistake into their deadliest opponent. 7 a.m. came too soon, my alarm piercing the quiet of the house. But I woke ready, warrior mind already calculating angles and probabilities. The final phase of my private war was about to begin. And this time, I wasn't fighting for survival. I was fighting for every veteran, every parent, every family that someone like Rachel had marked for destruction. The enemy had revealed itself. Now it was time to remind them why Marines are called the fiercest warriors in any war. Not because we can't be beaten, but because we always get back up, always learn from our wounds, and always complete the mission. Game on. The secure. Conference room at the FBI field office buzzed with controlled chaos. Multiple screens displayed real-time surveillance footage, financial transaction flows, and a web of connections linking Rachel's meeting to a network spanning 7 states. I sat at the center table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, nursing my 4th cup of coffee since midnight. We've identified the money trail, Agent Williams announced, pointing to the main screen. Your down payment triggered an automatic distribution to 6 different accounts. 3 overseas, 3 domestic shell companies. Marcus leaned over. My shoulder. Look at the activity spikes. They're accelerating timelines on at least 12 active operations. 12 families, I said quietly. 12 versions of what almost happened to me. Williams nodded grimly. Based on the coordination patterns, we believe they escalate multiple operations whenever they bring in a new client. Spreads the risk, creates confusion if anyone gets investigated. I studied the surveillance photos scrolling past. An elderly woman being wheeled into a medical center, a man in his 70s arguing with someone off camera, a family leaving a lawyer's office looking shell-shocked. These weren't just statistics. These were lives hanging in the balance. Mrs. Torres, Williams continued, the meet is confirmed for 2 p.m., but we've intercepted additional chatter. Rachel was on an encrypted call this morning mentioning verification concerns. Meaning what? They might be testing you. Could be. They suspect you're not who you claim to be, Marcus added. Or they always do this. Due diligence before committing to murder. I considered both possibilities. In my experience, networks like this survived through paranoia. What's the FBI's move if they abort? We have enough evidence to arrest Rachel and trace the immediate connections, but the larger operation, the leadership structure, we'd lose that. Then they don't abort. I stood, decision made. What's the backup plan if this goes sideways? Williams hesitated. We have assets in position, but if you're compromised inside a secondary location, I've been compromised before. Baghdad, 2004. IED took out half my squad. I spent 7 hours pinned down in hostile territory before extraction. I met his gaze. I'm not worried about surviving. I'm worried about stopping this network before they murder 12 more people. The room fell silent. These agents were good, but they weren't combat veterans. They understood risk assessment. I understood acceptable losses. At 1:30 p.m., I left the field office wearing the same red cardigan but different shoes. Ones with a panic button in the heel that would simultaneously alert the FBI and Marcus's security team. The Sarah persona settled over me like a familiar uniform. I arrived at Starbucks early, choosing a different table with clear sightlines to both exits. At exactly 2 p.m., Rachel appeared, but she wasn't alone. A man in his 60s followed her. Gray, hair, military bearing, expensive watch. The kind of man who made decisions rather than following them. Sarah, Rachel said, sitting down without invitation. This is Mr. Edwards. He reviews all significant contracts. Edwards studied me with the intensity of someone trained in interrogation. Rachel tells me you have an urgent situation. My father is changing his will tomorrow. Time sensitive doesn't begin to cover it. Yes, but I'm more interested in why a daughter with $6 million in inheritance potential is willing to risk everything rather than simply waiting for natural causes. The question was a test. I let anger flash across my face, the kind of anger that came from deep family wounds. Because my father has already lived 3 years beyond his doctor's predictions. Because every day he's alive is another day he could change his mind again. Because I've watched my brothers get everything while I've spent my life caring for him, and I'm done waiting. And you've never considered other approaches? Challenging the will? Proving mental incompetence? I've considered everything. This is what I've chosen. Edwards nodded slowly. We need to verify your financial capacity before proceeding. $200,000 is substantial. I have it, but I want guarantees. Timelines, documentation that this won't lead back to me. The documentation will be minimal, Rachel interjected, for obvious reasons. But the guarantee is our reputation. We've been doing this for 8 years without a single client exposure. Until 6 months ago, I said pointedly. When someone got caught. Edwards's expression hardened. That situation involved amateur interference and client deviation from protocol. It's why we've implemented additional security measures. Meaning you'll be accompanied during the transfer of funds for everyone's protection. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face neutral. This was the test. They wanted to control the environment, limit my communication, prevent any FBI involvement. Fine. Where and when? Tonight. 9 p.m. There's a storage facility on Industrial Boulevard. You'll bring the money. We'll provide final confirmation. And timeline. I fought every instinct that screamed trap. I need some assurance this isn't a setup. How do I know you won't just take the money and disappear? Rachel smiled, and for the first time it seemed genuine. Because we're not street-level criminals, Sarah. We're professionals. Your father will be dead within 36 hours of payment receipt, and you'll inherit everything without anyone suspecting foul play. That's our product. That's what you're buying. The casual way she said it, your father will be dead, hit me like physical force. Somewhere, right now, They were saying the same words about 12 other people. 9 p.m., I confirmed. I'll be there. As they left, Edward stopped and turned back. One more thing, Sarah. Bring only what was specified. No phones, no recording. Devices, no deviations. Our security will screen everything. After they disappeared, I remained seated for 10 minutes, giving the FBI team time to follow them. My real phone buzzed with a text from Williams. We copied everything. What's your assessment? I typed back, it's a test. They suspect something, but they're committed to the timeline. Need emergency protocols for tonight. Back at the command center, the mood was tense. We can't let you go in without backup, Williams insisted. Not with their security concerns. You don't have a choice. If I don't show, 12 people die. If I blow my cover, we lose the entire network. Marcus paced, like a caged animal. Rebecca, this is suicide. They're isolating you, probably planning to eliminate you after they get the money. Probably, I agreed. But they're also planning to kill 12 people in the next 36 hours. Do the math. The room erupted in arguments, risk assessment, protocol, violations, jurisdictional concerns. I let them debate while I studied the surveillance photos of the storage facility. 3 buildings, limited visibility, multiple exit points, classic ambush terrain. Finally, I stood and cut through the noise. I'm going. You can support that decision or not, but I'm going. Here's what I need. The cleanest route to extract after... I trigger the panic button, a trauma team staged nearby, and someone watching Danny. Why Danny? Williams asked. Because if this goes wrong, they'll punish anyone connected to me. My son's in prison. Vulnerable, predictable location. They could reach him easier than they can reach me tonight. The practicality of the request settled the room. Williams began issuing orders while I prepared for what might be my last operation. At 7 p.m., I sat with Marcus in the parking garage. He'd been my battle buddy through the worst of this, the closest thing to a Marine brother I'd had since retirement. You don't have to do this, he said one more time. Yeah, I do. You know that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black device. GPS tracker, dermally activated. Put it behind your ear, under your hair. Williams doesn't know about this. Williams doesn't need to know about everything. I pressed the tracker into place. Semper Fi, Marcus. Bring it back clean, Colonel. The 2 hours before the meeting crawled by like days. I reviewed every detail of Sarah's backstory, memorized the storage facility layout, practiced my breathing, techniques for stress management. At 8:30, I changed into nondescript clothing, checked the panic button one last time, and prepared to walk into what could very likely be my last ambush. But there was something different this time. In Baghdad, in Fallujah, I'd been fighting for abstract concepts: freedom, democracy, mission completion. Tonight, I was fighting for specific people, the woman in the surveillance photo being wheeled into the medical center, the man arguing with his family, the 12 families about to lose their loved ones to this network of predators. Sometimes the most personal wars become the most universal ones. At 8:45, I left the FBI building. Behind me, teams mobilized, communication channels opened, and contingency plans activated. Ahead of me waited Rachel, Edwards, and whatever verification they'd designed. The storage facility parking lot was as deserted as expected. No vehicles except a black SUV positioned near Building 2. As I approached, headlights flickered on and off, the signal. My phone had been left behind per instructions. The panic button would work, but I'd have no way to communicate details. This was going in blind, armed only with determination and whatever skills had kept me alive through 25 years of military service. Rachel stepped out of the SUV as I approached. Sarah, punctual. I appreciate that. Let's get this done, I replied. Of course. Mr. Edwards is waiting inside. We'll handle the transaction there. The storage unit door rolled open, revealing not a storage space, but what looked like a temporary office, table, chairs, laptop, and 3 people I didn't recognize. Professional-grade security. "This way," Rachel directed. Every instinct screamed danger, but I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a metallic finality that echoed like a cell door slamming shut. If this was a trap, it was the best one I'd ever walked into. But traps work both ways. Sometimes the bait knows it's bait and uses that knowledge to turn the tables. Sometimes the mouse has been planning the cat's demise all along. Inside the storage unit, the air was thick with tension and the metallic scent of fear. Edwards sat behind the makeshift desk, flanked by 2 men who definitely weren't administrative assistants. Rachel positioned herself between me and the door. The 4th person, a woman with a laptop, began setting up what looked like a mobile Wi-Fi hotspot. "Sarah," Edwards began, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please, sit. We have some preliminary matters to discuss before we proceed." I sat, aware of every movement, every angle, every possible exit that didn't exist. The panic button felt simultaneously too powerful and completely inadequate. First, the funds. He slid a paper toward me. "Account information. You'll transfer from your phone to this account." "I don't have my phone." "We'll provide one." The laptop woman held up a secured smartphone. "Untraceable, single use. You'll make the transfer. We'll verify receipt in real time." I reached for the phone, but Edwards held up his hand. "Before we proceed, I need clarification on something." Here it came, the test. The moment when Sarah either lived or died. My research team did some background work. Your father, Thomas Chen, served in Vietnam. Interesting coincidence that our lead anesthesiologist shares that name. My heart stopped, but my training kicked in. Thomas Chen is the most common Asian name in America. What's your point? No point. Just thorough. We also verified your father's will is indeed scheduled for revision tomorrow. But we couldn't find any record of his recent medical procedures. Fuck. They dug deeper than expected. Because he goes to the VA, I said, drawing from actual experience. Medical records are separate. Privacy laws. Edwards nodded slowly. Of course, proceed with the transfer. As I fumbled with the phone, my mind raced. The FBI was listening through the panic button. They'd heard everything, but would they wait for the money transfer to trace the network? Or would they? An explosion of sound shattered the moment. Not gunshots, sirens, lots of them. Getting closer, the room erupted into chaos. "It's a setup!" Rachel screamed, lunging toward me. I dove sideways, slamming my shoulder into the table. The laptop went flying. Edward's security team pushed toward the door, guns drawn. "FBI, freeze!" The storage unit door burst open. Tactical teams poured in like water through a dam break. Flashbang grenades disoriented everyone except me. I'd closed my eyes and covered my ears the moment I heard the sirens. In the chaos, Rachel pulled a gun. It was small, probably a .22, but deadly at close range. She swung it toward me, eyes wild with desperate fury. Time slowed. 25 years of military training condensed into a single motion. I rolled right, grabbed the chair leg, and swung upward in one fluid arc. The chair connected with Rachel's wrist. The gun clattered away. Down on the ground. Now. More voices, more weapons, more controlled chaos as the FBI secured the space. Through the confusion, I caught Edward's eye. He wasn't fighting. He was smiling. "You're good," he called out as they cuffed him. "Better than Olivia Torres was." The mention of my real name hit like a physical blow. "What do you know about Olivia Torres?" "I know she started all this. I know her case blew up our operation." His smile widened. "And I know who she really is. Nice to meet you, Colonel Torres." He'd known all along. This hadn't been a trap for Sarah. It had been a trap for me. But sometimes, Knowing you're walking into a trap is part of the plan. Marcus burst through the door, followed by Agent Williams. Rebecca, you okay? Fine, I managed, though my legs were shaking from adrenaline crash. Did you get them all? Still moving. But we traced the financial transfers. 23 arrests so far. More coming. I looked around the storage unit, at Rachel being led away, at Edward still smiling, at the network of computers and files that represented countless destroyed families. The 12 active operations? Stopped. Every single one. Medical interventions, patient notifications, family. Warnings, we got there in time. Relief washed over me, so intense I had to sit down again. Over the next 6 hours, as the FBI processed arrests and collected evidence, the scope of the network became clear. 87 suspected murders over 8 years. 46 veterans, 23 caregivers, 18 family members. Total stolen assets, over $40 million. Edwards had been the architect, a former hospital administrator who'd seen an opportunity in the complex intersection of elder care, veteran benefits, and family dysfunction. Dr. Hendricks had been his first recruit. Rachel was regional coordinator for the West Coast. Carmen had been just one of dozens of fake caregivers. But the biggest reveal came from Edwards himself during questioning. He'd been tracking my case since Danny's arrest, studying how we'd expose the operation. When Sarah appeared with an inheritance scheme that mirrored known patterns, they'd suspected a trap. We knew you were law enforcement, he told investigators, but we needed to confirm how much you knew, how extensive the investigation was. And we wanted you to lead us to your assets, the evidence you'd collected, the documentation you'd assembled. In his twisted logic, luring me into the storage unit wasn't about money, it was about damage control. If they could eliminate me and seize my evidence, they could continue operating with minor adjustments. They hadn't counted on me being recording device and bait simultaneously, or on the FBI's backup protocols, or on Marcus's unauthorized GPS tracker. By dawn, I was back home, surrounded by my support group, the same veterans who'd gathered when this all began. But now we weren't just survivors, we were witnesses to justice. So what happens now? Thomas asked, refilling my coffee for the 5th time. Now we rebuild, I said simply. The evidence we collected doesn't just put criminals in prison, it changes protocols, it saves lives. Sarah, Iraq veteran Sarah, pulled out her phone. It's already starting. Look. She showed me a news alert. VA announces new elder protection protocols after major investigation exposes national fraud network. The protocols were based directly on documentation from our case, verification procedures for non-family caregivers, mandatory third-party witnesses for medical decision changes, background checks for anyone with financial power of attorney, over veteran estates. 12 families are having dinner together tonight because of what you did, Marcus added quietly. 12 people who would have been corpses by tomorrow. I looked around the room at faces I'd come to know over months of healing together. We all did it. Everyone who shared their story, who refused to let shame silence them, who chose to fight, back instead of disappearing, we all did this. That evening, alone for the first time in 48 hours, I called Danny's facility. When he came to the phone, his voice was different. Lighter somehow. Mom, I just heard. The whole prison is talking about it. How do you feel about your inheritance now? I asked. Like I don't deserve it, but maybe I can earn the chance to prove I do. Danny, I'm leaving something in that safety deposit box along with the key. Something you need to see when you get out. What is it? The letter I wrote the night they arrested you. Not angry words, not bitter words, just truth about what family means when it's tested beyond all reasonable limits. Mom, and I'm changing the trust terms. You'll still have to complete the community service, the counseling, the elder abuse prevention training, but now there's something else. You have to speak at veteran facilities. You have to tell your story. You have to help other families recognize the warning signs. I can do that. I want to do that. Good. Because this isn't just about justice anymore. It's about prevention. It's about making sure no other family goes through what we went through. After we hung up, I sat on my back porch and watched the sunset paint the sky in warrior colors. One more time. The physical wounds had healed. My hip was stronger than before surgery. The emotional wounds were scarring over, becoming part of who I was rather than defining all of who I was. Tomorrow, I'd begin a new mission. Speaking engagements. At VA facilities. Consulting on elder protection protocols. Training caregivers to recognize and report abuse. Building a network of survivors who protected each other instead of preying on each other. But tonight, I was just a woman sitting on her own porch, in her own home, answering to no one's expectations but her own. The deed was in my name. The will was legally binding. The threats were neutralized. They'd tried to steal my sunset. Instead, I'd lit the whole sky on fire. If this story helped you recognize the warning signs of elder abuse, or if you want to learn more about protecting the veterans in your life, please subscribe to our channel. Next week, the accountant who caught his partner embezzling and how he turned the tables. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it, because sometimes the best revenge is preventing someone else from becoming a victim. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Knowledge shared is power multiplied. And remember, if something feels wrong with how a family member is being treated, trust that instinct. It might save a life. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never underestimate what a survivor can do when they refuse to be a victim. Semper Fi.